Post-print plus process plans, lots of P's in this session. What are we going to do? We really want to do hands-on again, as yesterday in the second episode brought to you. And the first two P's in this episode are dedicated to post-print. And then we could also add processing steps with yet another P. And the first demo I'd like to give is how to a new feature in pdfToolbox 16, as everything in this season, flatten transparency and keep processing steps alive. What does that mean? So we yesterday already introduced that and told you that processing steps is layer information on layers related to processing steps that are not the actual print process. And assume you now want to flatten a file that has transparency and that also has processing steps information. What's going to happen is the complete content stream is being rewritten by the transparency flattener, and the content stream where all the page objects definitions are has markers, because it needs to have markers that then relate the object that is currently drawn to a layer. So there is a layer structure on document level, and when you draw an object, that object is put onto the layer by means of a marker in the content stream. Since the content stream is being rewritten totally when transparency flattening is applied, all these markers go away. So what's happening in the result is you still have the layer structure in the PDF file, but the objects are no longer associated with any of the layers, so their visibility cannot be changed anymore. In pdfToolbox 16, you now have the ability to exclude page objects from transparency flattening. When objects are excluded, they are put aside, and after the transparency flattening process, are put it back onto the page. So they will overlap the content that was there before and that was transparency flattened. For processing steps objects, which need the layer information to be usable, that is exactly what you want to do, because processing steps objects that overlap print content need to be in front of it anyway, and they also must not use transparency. So let's just have a look. I open my fresh pdfToolbox 16. I already have a PDF file here, which happens to be one of the processing steps files. I have a layer that has the title design, and you see that I can switch on and off layers. So now I have switched off all the structural, all the positions. So my layers work nicely. And that file that I also wanted to demonstrate, when I analyze the file, it shows me that there in fact is transparency in that file. So lots of the objects are transparent. And I mean, we yesterday, and David was quite frank about it, transparency flattening is a bad thing to happen to any PDF file. So if at all possible, avoid it. And then you don't need that feature at all. But there might be circumstances where you're forced to do that, and then you should know what is possible. So let's now flatten transparency. So, and then I just go for this one, fixing, saving the result, and overwriting a previous result. It's now flattening the file. And then if I switch off the design, or the white, or the legend, nothing's happening. So the layer structure is there in the PDF file, but as I've just said, all the layer information is there, but there is no connection between page objects and these layers anymore. So no good. So we couldn't now extract the die line, for instance, from this object because it can't be identified. So let's get rid of that result and go back to the original, and then just to double check, switching off the layer. So that is indeed the original. And now I have an alternative here, which is flatten transparency, keep processing steps layers. And if I do that and save the result again, my layers still work. Except if I click on this one, it doesn't. So why is that the case? It took me a moment to find out in the first place. Why is that the case? Because that is not processing steps. The design layer is not a processing steps layer, and therefore it has ignored it, and therefore that layer doesn't work anymore. And that is because I've set up the fix-up to flatten transparency, and here you see the new parameter in this fix-up, which has a title exclude page objects and put on top of result. And that is exactly what it does. And since that was configured to not work with layers in general, but only with layers that have processing steps metadata, it didn't exclude the design layer. And by the way, that wouldn't be the right thing to do because that design layer exactly had the transparency. Yeah. But then I should also demonstrate that my result is still the intended result, because if I run the check again that identifies transparent objects, there is no transparency anymore in that PDF file left, because all the objects that were kept in the file, not put into the transparency flattener engine, didn't use transparency in the first place. So that was that. I should say that this new feature is not only useful for processing steps objects. So you could, in the same way, exclude other objects, for instance, any objects that are on any layers, any text objects, any spot colors, any images with high resolution, or images that are rather large. So we've seen in support there are situations where you need to do transparency flattening and where you want to exclude objects. And that is an easy and very straightforward way to do that. Next two piece is process plans. And I have three features to demonstrate and mention in this section. And we will be getting back to post-print and process plans, processing steps later on. Now we enter the realm of process plans, and the subtitle here is Getting Script-Free with Process Plans. And the subtitle, so you could also say we are now looking into something where we keep objects, but not just in a transparency flattening process, but in something different. And that was also always possible, not always, but in previous versions also possible in a process plan. In a process plan, you can have a step that says create PDF copy, and that allows you to copy the current PDF and then maybe later on getting back to it. Often, the copy is then used in a later step of the process plan to put it on top of it. So we could have done what I've just shown you in with this new transparency flattening parameter. We could have done that in a process plan in pdfToolbox 15 already, if we would remove all the process plan objects from the PDF page, flattening it, and then putting it back on top of it. And this create PDF file copy would have allowed us to do so. The new thing in pdfToolbox 16, so in pdfToolbox 15, you would have to use JavaScript, specifically the app.doc result files object that provides you, that gives you the path to the file copy. In pdfToolbox 16, we have made that more convenient. And then by simply, it's possible now to assign the path to the variable in the create PDF copy step itself. So here in create PDF copy, you have a new parameter, which is copy into variable, and there you can pick a simple variable. Probably easier to understand if I demonstrate it. So let's go to pdfToolbox. We don't need that file anymore. We use now this one. So this is an etiquette. Oh, I don't want to do that. I want to show you here I have some cut line, a vector object, and in the background I have a shading. And then let's now assume we want to convert all the shadings in this PDF file into images, because whatever our later processing steps don't support, our output device doesn't support shades. We could of course also use very complex shade objects. And then what we could do is, I have a process plan, rasterized smooth shades, and then I run it, save the result, and now it has converted my shade object into an image. The appearance didn't change. So what I did is I removed all the objects, I converted the page into an image, and then put the objects back on top of my file, which was possible with pdfToolbox 15 already. However, but now I have here in create PDF copy the ability to assign the file path to a variable. So I can just pick a variable that already exists, and then the variable that I'm using here is file, has the name file, and then input non-shade objects on top of the page. For the overlay that I'm using here, I'm using exactly that variable. And that allows me to do the things that I could only do in pdfToolbox 15 using JavaScript without a line of code. Okay. So moving on. Now it's getting more complex even. Now we want to loop over pages in the process plan. So why do we want to do that? In the process plan, normally always the full PDF, meaning all pages in the PDF file, are processed in just one go. And normally that works just fine. But once in a while, you need to process pages individually. So for instance, if pages have varying page sizes, you may want to process them differently, or you want to place something onto a PDF page that is different on each page. Then you want to loop over all the pages in the process plan. That means in every run through the process plan, you would process only one page. And via a variable, you would make sure that one page is processed after the other. That was possible in pdfToolbox 15, but there you always had to have at least 2 JavaScript steps. Now in pdfToolbox 16, that becomes possible without a single line of JavaScript. And the mechanism that is used is you create, you use a master, a host, a parent, a process plan, and in that process plan you run a child process plan, and you tell the child process plan to run for each page individually, so one page after the other. And you do so by clicking a checkbox, a new checkbox that says process each page individually, in parentheses loop. And that is what you do. So here's my child process plan. And then with this checkbox, I make sure that the PDF file is run several times through this child process plan, and each time only one page is processed. Now, in the child process plan, of course, I have to make sure that only one page is actually processed. So I need to pass a variable into the child process plan that is with each run of the child process plan assigned to a new page. Yeah? And therefore, here in my parent process plan, I have the ability again to pick a variable. Here we are using car page as a name of the variable. And then there is a third new checkbox that allows me to set the parameter pre-flight only pages in the child steps automatically. So I've said in my child process plan, I need to make sure that only the respective page is processed. And normally I would have to go to all the steps in the child process plan and assign the variable car page to that specific step. But this is a convenience feature. You don't have to do that if you use that checkbox. So let's rather look into how that really works. So I again have a PDF file. I have many, but this is one. And that has 4 pages. And then this is again the pdfVT sample file, Big Sur and the backside, and Chicago and another backside. So 4 pages. And let's now assume that what we want to do is we want to add some visualization of ink amount to the bottom of a page. So let's run this process plan here. We use test mode, so I hit the Alt key, then I click on test, and then it comes up with a question. So which page do you want to process? And maybe we process page 2, and then we run it. And what it does is it has enlarged the second page a bit and has placed an ink amount preview of that page in that new area. And it has done so for just a single page, as I have told you. And it would be at least hard to achieve that for all the pages without a loop. So if I would want to have this ink amount on all pages, then I would normally use this very same process plan in a loop, and first process the first page, then the second, and so forth. And let's try to do that. So we've seen I have already set this up to work only with one page. We've seen the variable, I've entered 2, and then it has processed the second page. So I already have a variable here, which is the page selector in this action is set to car page, and the same here where it enlarges the page 10 centimeter at the bottom, and also here where it places the ink amount preview. Yeah, so that is already set up to work with just a single page. And if I would now create a new process plan that calls this child process plan, and then we're doing it on the fly, and that was add ink coverage visualization. That was a child process plan, and I now say process each page individually, so one page after the other. I need to pick the right variable, which was car page, And I can also auto set pre-flight only pages, although I don't have to, because as we've seen, I already set every step in the child process plan up to only process one page. Yeah, so it doesn't matter whether or not I switch it on here. And let's try out whether I have forgotten anything. So we use test. And you see it now loops over all pages, and it has accurately created ink amount previews on all 4 pages of the PDF file. And if that would be a 10-pager, of course the same would have happened. Yeah. So that is, it would have been possible before, but then I would have to set in a JavaScript step, find out how many pages does this PDF have, and then go through this number and run this process plan and stop it with another JavaScript step after this child process. So this is now very easy, so easy that I was able to do it live here in a demo. And so easy that I don't even save the result. That's that. And then finally another one which still needs a little bit of at least JSON, which is a new feature also in process plan, replace current PDF. In a process plan you have the step add files. And add files, the step allows you to add files as first pages in your active PDF, as last pages in your active PDF, or embed the files into your active PDF. In pdfToolbox 16, it becomes possible to replace your active PDF altogether. Why would you want to do that? So I agree it's not a frequent requirement, but we've seen that in support, and I found one actually with my girlfriend. She was asking me, she was doing this with her smartphone, and she needed it for some presentation she wanted to do. And although she normally likes color, she didn't want this blue shade here at the bottom. And I found out the easiest way to get rid of it was to just use the black separation. So I converted everything into CMYK and then just created a separation out of it, the black separation, and then I sent it back to her, and she was quite happy. And then, as always, when I deal with PDF, I'm thinking about whether I can automate that. And then I realized, yes, we have this nice new feature. And then if I now again use the test mode here and run it, it indeed gives me a much nicer result back. And in fact, it has now replaced the active PDF with its separation. I don't want to go into all the details here. It's a very simple one. So in the first step, I'm exporting the black separation, and in the second step, I just replace the active PDF with the file that I have previously created. And that is all the new things in process plans without JavaScript. Which brings us to the very moment where we're going back to processing steps. You go back to processing steps, I go back to my chair, and we will see the product manager, Sarah, on stage. Bye.
Yeah, hi everyone. So, as Dietrich said, coming back to processing steps. Dietrich has to switch off his microphone.
To mute.
Okay. So, with pdfToolbox, there will be a new predefined library called processing steps, where you have all the checks, fix-ups, and profiles that are related to processing steps all in one place. And of course, this is nothing new that pdfToolbox supports processing steps. As you can see here on a screenshot, before pdfToolbox 16, you also had, for example, in the PDF standards library, a processing steps group where you have two predefined pre-flight profiles to check your PDF files for processing steps. And these two profiles have now also been switched or moved into the new processing steps library. But of course, that's not all. We also added new functionality to it as well. So let me just briefly go over the key components of this new library. So the first one are the profiles that were already part of the PDF standards library. And as I said, you can use them to either check your PDF files and to get information about the processing step metadata, so to get a current state, what is happening in your PDF file, or if you want to verify your PDF files against the processing steps ISO standard. The two at the bottom are new in pdfToolbox 16, so it is a profile called Add Processing Steps Layer and a process plan that is called Prepare PDF using technical colors with processing steps layers. And the profile is also part of the process plan, and it puts objects using technical colors, meaning non-print objects like a varnish layer or a cut line, on processing steps layers. And then we have the process plan. As I said, this also uses the profile, but in addition, it also added a separate layer for the print content so that all objects that are really end up being printed are on a separate layer as well. So you can really prepare your PDF files for production. But I will also come back to this process plan in a minute and give you a little bit more details to that. But for a moment, I will come back to the first two profiles, because in pdfToolbox we also added 4 new check properties to check certain requirements of the ISO standard. As you can see, they are quite specific, so you can check, for example, the syntax for custom processing steps keys or some color-related conditions between processing step layers or objects. And as I said, it is quite specific, so I will not go too much into detail here, but just to let you know, these two profiles have been updated in pdfToolbox 16. So if you run them now, you may have another pre-flight result because, of course, we expanded them and they cover now even more requirements for the standard. Yeah, coming back to the process plan. So if you're working with processing steps in pdfToolbox, you might know that right now there was no way to automate the process. So of course you can put a non-print object like a cut line on a separate layer and then also add the required processing step metadata, but all of this has to be manually. So with pdfToolbox 16, we really wanted to provide a solution to give you a way to automate this process and to automatically prepare your PDF files with processing steps layers. And to do so, we needed a collection of spot color names that are used in practice. So we come up with this spreadsheet. You can also see a screenshot here. And if you attended the session from yesterday or have attended our PDF camp last year, you already are familiar with that. And a lot of people also filled out the form, and we gathered a huge collection of spot color names that are really used in practice, and that is also the basis of this process plan. So yeah, maybe enough theory, and let me just show you the process plan in action. Let me open my test file. Yeah, so first I can show you the new library. So as I said, it is called Processing Steps and is there by default. And let me also open the spot color preview for a moment to show you what is part of my PDF file. So here you can see I have some spot colors in it, and also non-print objects like a die line, a varnish, and embossing, and a white. And I can also open the Layer Explorer, and here you can see that right now I don't have any existing layers, and therefore, of course, no processing step metadata in my PDF file. And let me just run this process plan to show you what is the outcome. And as you can see, as a result, I will have now different layers in my PDF file just by running the process plan. And I can also switch on and off some of them. You can see here now. Wait, why is it not working? Okay, so you can see we have a varnish, a white layer with also the processing step metadata set to it. And then we also have a design layer here. So what I want to show you as well is that, as I said, this is the process plan that we have created and that is based on the spreadsheet. So you also have all the checks and fix-up that are used in the process plan also here in the checks and fix-ups as a single piece. And for example, let me just open the spot color name for a cut line or for cutting. Here you can see where the spreadsheet comes into action. For every processing step type, we have added this check properties, where you have here a list of all the spot color names that have been entered into the spreadsheet. And another super small feature in pdfToolbox 16, what is also not quite related to processing steps, is, as you can see here, the operator. Wait, we have small technical issues. Okay, it's fixed. So, okay. So as you can see here, the check property uses a so-called operator, and usually it was only possible to check certain values that is contained in a list or is not contained in a list. And now with pdfToolbox 16, you also have two new operators that check is contained in list but ignore upper and lower cases. That means here it is not necessary to enter every spot color name 2 times, so one for lowercase and one for upper cases. So it is now more flexible. We also decided not to use regex here. Of course, this would also be an option, but we really wanted to make sure that you can add or adjust the list. So if some spot colors is missing, or if there are spot colors that you don't want to have in the list, you can easily add them here. Okay, so that's the first feature that I wanted to show you. And let me come back to the last one in the session. So this is Derive stroke from filled vector path. So if you're working with PDF files that contain cut lines, you may know that a cut line has to be a stroked vector object, so that cutting devices can interpret the cut line properly. And this is a requirement, and if that is not the case, the production will not work. So, however, in some cases, it can be that a cut line will not be a stroke, but a filled vector object. And however, sometimes this is intentionally. So, for example, some people want to make sure that the cut line of a PDF file is properly created, so they derive a new one based on the existing one using tracing technology, for example, to make sure that that the cut line is properly created and that it is closed everywhere. So that is one case, or it can also sometimes happen by accident if the cut line has been converted into a filled vector object at some point of the process. So in both cases, it doesn't really matter because in both cases the cut line is not working. So with pdfToolbox, we added a new fix-up type called Derive stroke from filled vector path. And this converts lines that are encoded as filled vector objects into stroked vector objects. And here on the slide you can see the UI of the fix-up, and you can also see that it has a lot of parameters that you can set. And most of them are pretty straightforward. For example, you have the option to remove the converted lines, meaning to remove the filled vector object when the stroke vector object has been added, which is probably most of the time the case, what you want to do. Then you can also keep the color space for the stroke object. You can also set a new color value and spot color name, for example, for it. You can keep the line width. You can also set an individual line width. You can set overprint options and so on. And here at the bottom, you also have, of course, an apply to filter where you can specify what filled vector object should be taken into account by the fix-up. Yeah, there are also two parameters that probably need a little bit more explanation. The first one is maximum distance between parallel edges, and that just means the maximum line thickness in point that should be considered. And for most of the cases, probably a value between 1 or 3 point is sufficient, because even if your cut line is a filled vector object, it is probably not thicker than 3 point, I would say. But of course, you can set this value individually. And then we have the parallelism tolerance. And this is the allowable variation in the distance between the edges of a filled vector path. And this is there to also cover slightly variations in a filled vector object, so that these are also covered by the fix-up. So if I have set my values, as you can see here in my screenshot, all of these 3 example lines or filled vector objects would be converted into stroke, because all 3 of them are not thicker than 3 points. And the maximum tolerance between the edges of the filled vector object is not higher than 1 point. So I hope this slide makes it more clear what these 2 parameters mean. And maybe you can imagine that behind this fix-up there is a quite complex algorithm, because of course for a human it is quite easy to redraw a line. But to teach a software how or where to draw the line is quite complex. And this is also a feature that took, I would say, probably most of the development time. And because of this complexity, there are some limitations, and it cannot work 100% with all PDF files. So let me just briefly go over the limitations. So maybe starting with the most obvious, the fix-up is designed to convert filled vector lines into strokes. So if you have a filled vector object like here on the right, this will not be covered by the fix-up, of course, because it is not a line. Then the second limitation is as soon as filled vector lines or objects crossing each other, like the one on the right, it is also not work, because it is simply not possible. And the third limitation is if you have pretty complex files, like these detailed packaging files, for example, where you have cuts and stuff like that, the fix-up will also not 100% work. But as a pro example here on the left, of course, if my shape just have a complex shape, then that works with the fix-up. So enough of the limitations. Let me show you also this fix-up in action. Or let me just switch here. So I will open also my demo file. I will switch my library. So let me also just briefly show you what's the current state of my PDF file. For that I will open the object inspector, and as you can see here we have a filled vector object in the separation color cut contour. And of course, as I said, we don't want a filled vector object for my cut line. So I just simply run this fix up to show you how it works. You can see really quickly the appearance changed. You can also see now we have a vector stroked object as I expected it. I can also just briefly go into my setting options to show you what I set up. So of course I removed the converted line, so the filled object, because I don't want that anymore in my PDF file. I also, for this demo, changed the color value, so it's not magenta anymore, but cyan. And I also said I want to keep the line width of the filled vector object, but of course I could also specify a thinner line if that is required for the production.